6 a.m., Tuesday morning, I step outside for coffee, and the smell hits me like a punch, raw bleach, burning my eyes and throat. My pH meter screams 11.8. The lake, my lake, is glowing unnatural blue. Hundreds of rainbow trout float belly up, silver scales catching the sunrise like a graveyard. This was where Margaret and I sat every morning watching fish jump while we held hands in silence. She passed last year. This lake was all I had left of her. And there she stands. Veronica Sterling Cross, HOA president, smirking from her mansion window like she finally broke me. She thinks poisoning my lake will force me to sell. She has no idea she just poisoned the entire neighborhood's drinking water. What would you do? Drop your city below. I want to know who's watching. She's about to learn the hard way. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name's Eugene Kellerman. Everyone calls me Bud, and I'm 61 years old. Spent 37 years running water treatment plants across Oregon before a back injury forced me into early retirement. These days I live on disability payments that barely cover my medications, about $800 a month if I'm lucky. This lake? It's been in my family for 4 generations. My grandfather built that hand-carved fishing dock you can barely see through the chemical haze. The scent of Douglas fir and mountain air used to mix with the gentle babble of the creek feeding into the lake. Margaret and I would sit there every morning for 23 years of marriage, her hand in mine, watching the mist rise off the water. She died 3 years ago. Lung cancer. The doctors gave us 6 months. She fought for 18. When the pain got too bad to walk far, that dock became our sanctuary. Even now, I can still smell her lavender perfume mixing with the pine needles. After she passed, I started a small fishing guide service. Nothing fancy, just helping disabled veterans like myself find some peace on the water. Charged $50 for a half-day trip, maybe brought in $300 a month when the fish were biting. It wasn't about the money. It was about sharing what Margaret and I had found here. Enter Veronica Sterling Cross. Marketing executive, drives a white Tesla that probably costs more than I'll see in 5 years. Been HOA president for 6 years running, and let me tell you, power went to her head faster than champagne bubbles. She's got this collection of fake designer handbags that she rotates based on which neighbor she's planning to terrorize that week. Cedar Ridge Estates. That's our little slice of paradise turned homeowner hell. 52 houses, mostly retirees who moved here for the peace and quiet. Everyone pays the HOA $180 a month for what Veronica calls premium mountain spring water delivery service. Sounds fancy, right? The trouble started 6 months ago when Veronica decided my lake would make the perfect centerpiece for some luxury spa resort she's dreaming up. Problem is, my property isn't for sale. So she got creative. First came the fines. $2,500 for unauthorized commercial activity because I was taking veterans fishing. Then she started showing up at my dock with her little clipboard, taking photos of me casting my line like I was running some kind of illegal operation. You want to know the kicker? My vintage pH meter. This beautiful brass instrument from 1987 that Margaret bought me for our anniversary. It's been sitting in my tackle box for years. I used to test our well water with it, back when I was paranoid about everything after working in water treatment. These days I carry it everywhere out of habit like a security blanket. That morning when I found the chemical smell and dead fish, that little meter saved my life. One whiff of those fumes, and I would have been calling poison control. Instead, I knew exactly what I was looking at. Someone had dumped enough pool shock into my lake to sterilize a city swimming pool. The sound of gravel crunching under tires broke my concentration. Veronica's Tesla was pulling into the HOA office parking lot, and through her window, I could see that satisfied smirk. She'd been planning this. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my 37 years in water treatment had taught me more than just how to read a pH meter. I knew how water systems worked. I knew how to trace contamination sources. And most importantly, I knew that water always finds its way to the truth. Standing there in the chemical haze, holding my dead wife's gift, I made a decision. Margaret always said that water thieves eventually drown in their own lies. Time to test that theory. 3 days after the poisoning, the gravel crunched again. This time it wasn't Veronica's Tesla. It was a white pickup truck with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife logos plastered across the doors. My stomach dropped like a stone in deep water. The officer who climbed out looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Badge read Inspector Martinez, and he had that apologetic shuffle of someone forced to investigate a complaint he knew was bogus. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm here about a report of unlicensed commercial fishing activity." Veronica had moved fast, couldn't beat me with HOA fines, so she'd escalated to state authorities. The complaint claimed I was running an unauthorized guide service that threatened local fish populations. $5,000 investigation fee if they found violations. More importantly, any commercial fishing violations could jeopardize my disability benefits, my only income. "Sir, I have all my permits," I told Martinez, pulling out a folder Margaret had helped me organize. "Recreational fishing license, small business permit from the county, even liability insurance." Martinez spent an hour reviewing everything. His expression shifted from dutiful bureaucrat to confused professional. "Mr. Kellerman, these are all perfectly valid. More thorough than most commercial operations I see." That's when I realized Veronica had made her first mistake. She didn't understand the difference between harassment and legitimate enforcement, but I did understand bureaucratic warfare. 37 years of dealing with environmental inspectors had taught me that much. So I drove to the county records office. You know those dusty basement rooms where property deeds go to die? That's where I found Veronica's Achilles heel. The Cedar Ridge Estates homeowner covenants, filed in 1987, clearly stated that HOA authority extended only to properties developed as part of the planned community. My land, inherited from my grandfather in 1962, was specifically exempted as pre-existing agricultural use. I'd inherited this place 25 years before they built their first house. They had no legal authority over my property. None. Zero. With my last $3,000 in savings, I hired Sarah Monroe, an attorney who specialized in property rights. Asian American woman about 40, sharp as a fillet knife and twice as precise. Sarah took one look at my documents and smiled like a cat who'd found a goldfish bowl. "Mr. Kellerman," she said, "this is what we call a slam dunk." Meanwhile, Veronica was calling emergency HOA meetings about unsightly fishing activities disrupting the community aesthetic. I heard from my neighbor Dave that she'd spent 20 minutes ranting about how my fishing dock lowered property values and created visual pollution. The woman was so focused on her luxury spa dreams that she missed the obvious question. If my property was such an eyesore, why were property values in Cedar Ridge still climbing? Inspector Martinez called the next week. His voice carried that tone of a man who'd been chewed out by his supervisor. "Mr. Kellerman, I want to apologize. Your permits are completely valid. In fact, they're more comprehensive than required. Someone gave us bad information. Here's something most people don't know about property rights law. When you inherit land with existing use patterns, those patterns become legally protected activities. Doesn't matter what the neighbors build around you later. In legal terms, it's called grandfathered use, and it trumps any homeowner association covenant." Translation: you can't retroactively ban legal activities on private land, no matter how many clipboard-wielding HOA presidents complain about it. But Veronica wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 2 days after Inspector Martinez cleared me, I found her standing at my property line with a city inspector. This guy wore a cheap suit and carried himself like someone who enjoyed making other people's lives miserable. They were pointing at my lake and talking in hushed tones about environmental hazards. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught enough. Words like mosquito breeding ground, and public health concern, and abatement order. The inspector kept nodding and taking notes while Veronica painted my pristine mountain lake as some kind of ecological disaster zone. That night, I sat on Margaret's dock with my pH meter. The chemical smell was finally fading and a few brave fish were starting to return, but I could feel the storm clouds gathering. Margaret used to say that people who abuse power eventually abuse the wrong person. As I tested the water, pH finally back down to a healthy 7.2. I wondered if Veronica had any idea what she was really dealing with. In my tackle box, next to the pH meter, was Sarah Monroe's business card. Time to make another call. Because if Veronica wanted to escalate to environmental warfare, she'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent 4 decades learning how to win those battles. The abatement order arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked embarrassed to be there. $15,000 to remediate mosquito breeding habitat and potential environmental hazards within 30 days, or the city would drain my lake and bill me for the work. 15 grand. That's more than I see in a year and a half of disability payments. I read through the citation 3 times, my hands shaking from something that wasn't just my arthritis. The inspector, a guy named Bradley Hutchins, had cited standing water conducive to insect breeding and potential bacterial contamination from fish waste. Fish waste. In a lake, where fish live. The smell of diesel fuel announced Hutchins' return visit. He climbed out of a city truck with a clipboard and that self-important strut of someone who'd never been challenged by the people he pushed around. What caught my eye wasn't his attitude, it was his wrist. Brand new Rolex Submariner, probably $8,000 retail. Funny thing for a city inspector making $45,000 a year. "Mr. Kellerman," he called out, like we were old friends. "Just checking on compliance with the abatement order." I walked over, still carrying my morning coffee. "Mr. Hutchins, I'm curious about something. How long have you been with the city?" 8 years, he said, puffing up with pride. 8 years and you're wearing a watch worth more than your monthly salary? His face went 3 shades of red. That's not relevant to this inspection." "No, but it's relevant to who's paying for luxury watches." That's when I knew Veronica had moved from harassment to straight-up bribery. But knowing and proving are different animals entirely. My back was screaming that night, and I couldn't afford the good pain medications. Sleep came in 2-hour chunks between muscle spasms. During one of those dark, aching hours at 3 a.m., I remembered something from my water treatment days. Environmental violations flow uphill to federal agencies. So I called Jake Morrison. Jake and I had worked together 15 years ago when the EPA was investigating contamination at a paper mill outside Portland. He's a career inspector, the kind of guy who actually gives a damn about keeping water clean. If anyone would care about illegal chemical dumping, it was Jake. "Bud?" His voice carried that familiar tone of someone who'd seen too many environmental crimes go unpunished. "What's got you calling at dawn?" I told him about the pool shock dumping, the dead fish, the pH readings that belonged in a chemistry lab, not a mountain lake. Jake went quiet for a long time. "Bud, what you're describing is a clear violation of the Clean Water Act. Dumping chlorinated chemicals into natural waterways is a federal crime. We're talking $50,000 fines minimum. Can you test for residue?" "Brother, I can test for residue from chemicals dumped 6 months ago. When can I come take samples?" Jake arrived that afternoon with equipment that made my vintage pH meter look like a pocket calculator. Spectrometers, conductivity meters, test kits for more chemicals than I knew existed. We spent 3 hours collecting samples from different points around the lake. The readings told a story that made my blood boil. Calcium hypochlorite residue consistent with pool shock, levels high enough to kill every living thing in the water, and a concentration pattern that pointed to a single dump site right where the road closest to Veronica's house met the shoreline. "Bud," Jake said, sealing the last sample container, "whoever did this wasn't trying to control mosquitoes. This was intentional environmental sabotage. The concentration levels are way beyond any legitimate treatment purpose." Here's what most people don't understand about environmental law. The moment someone dumps chemicals into natural water, it stops being a local HOA dispute and becomes a federal crime. The EPA doesn't care about your neighborhood politics or property values. They care about one thing: protecting water quality. Translation: poisoning waterways is a federal crime, not pest control, no matter what excuse you put on the paperwork. Jake promised to fast-track the lab results and launch a formal investigation. Within a week, I had official EPA documentation of illegal chemical contamination in my lake. But Veronica wasn't done escalating. She'd moved from harassment to bribery to environmental sabotage. I should have seen the next move coming. The call came on Friday afternoon, Bradley Hutchins sounding nervous now. "Mr. Kellerman, we've received additional complaints about your lake. The city's considering emergency drainage procedures under the Public Health Code." Emergency drainage. They were threatening to destroy my lake entirely. That evening, I sat on Margaret's dock with the EPA report in my lap. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the water gold and red. Somewhere in that chemical haze, new fish were already moving in from the connecting creek. Margaret always said that bullies keep pushing until someone pushes back harder. Time to start pushing. The weekend brought more dead fish, not from contamination this time, from a second chemical attack. I found them Sunday morning, another 50 trout floating near the eastern shore, fresh chemical burns on their gills. This time I was ready with my camera and sample containers. The ammonia smell was unmistakable. industrial-strength algaecide, the kind swimming pool companies use for severe contamination. 2 attacks meant this wasn't impulsive, this was systematic. My phone rang before I could finish collecting evidence. Sarah Monroe's voice carried the tight control of someone delivering very bad news. Bud, the city filed for emergency public health intervention. They're claiming your lake presents an imminent hazard to community water safety. Judge scheduled an emergency hearing for Tuesday morning. What does that mean? It means they want to drain your lake in 72 hours. I spent Sunday night staring at the ceiling, my back screaming from stress and old injuries. Margaret's photos on the nightstand watched me wrestle with the impossible math. I couldn't afford to fight a legal battle, but I couldn't afford to lose this place either. Monday morning brought an unexpected ally. Dave Kowalski knocked on my door around 7 a.m. Dave lives 3 houses down from Veronica and has the kind of face that never learned to lie. Retired electrician, good man, keeps his opinions to himself unless something really pisses him off. "But I need to tell you something," he said, looking nervous as a cat near a dog kennel. "Saturday night, I saw lights by your lake around 2 a.m. Figured maybe you couldn't sleep, we're doing some night fishing. But this morning, my wife Linda mentioned something weird." "What kind of weird?" "Veronica asked her if we'd noticed any unusual odors from your lake lately. Asked real casual-like, but Linda said she seemed nervous, like she was checking to see if anyone noticed something." Dave pulled out his phone. "I got curious, so I checked my security camera. It doesn't point toward your lake, but it catches the road. Look at this." The timestamp read 1:47 a.m. Saturday night. A white Tesla, headlights off, creeping down the road toward my lake. The license plate was partially visible. Veer something. "There's more," Dave said. "Sunday morning around 11 a.m. Same car, but this time she parked and walked toward the water carrying something. Looked like a gallon jug. We had her. Video evidence of Veronica at my lake during both chemical attacks. But Monday afternoon brought another problem. Linda Kowalski called, voice shaking. "Bud, Veronica just offered Dave $5,000 cash to reconsider what he thinks he saw Saturday night. She said reporting false information to authorities could get him in legal trouble. Witness tampering, bribery. The woman was digging her hole deeper by the hour. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked the entire perimeter of my property. My grandfather's survey stakes were still there, rusted but legible. And that's when I noticed something that stopped me cold. A thin black pipe, maybe 4 inches in diameter, running from the far edge of my lake toward the HOA development. It was partially hidden by blackberry bushes, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. I followed it for about 50 feet before it disappeared underground. My water treatment experience kicked in. That pipe was too large for irrigation, too straight for natural drainage. It looked like a water intake system. Using a trenching shovel from my shed, I carefully excavated around the pipe. 3 feet down, I found what I was looking for. A professional-grade intake manifold with flow controls and pressure gauges. This wasn't some makeshift setup. Someone had spent serious money installing a permanent water extraction system. The serial numbers on the equipment led me to Morrison Pump Company in Portland. A quick phone call to their service department confirmed my suspicions. The system had been installed in 2009 under permit number WR22847, registered to Cedar Ridge Estates Utilities Management. Cedar Ridge Estates. Veronica's HOA. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a legal pad and calculator, working through the math. A 4-inch intake pipe could move about 12,000 gallons per day. Multiply that by 15 years, and you're looking at 65 million gallons of water extracted from my lake without permission. The kicker? Every resident in Cedar Ridge paid $180 monthly for premium mountain spring water delivery. That's $9,260 per month, $112,320 per year, flowing into HOA accounts for water they were stealing from my property. 15 years times $112,320 equals $1,684,800 in fraudulent billing. Margaret used to say that thieves always get caught by their own greed. As I stared at those numbers, I realized Veronica hadn't just poisoned my lake to stop my fishing. She'd poisoned the source of her own illegal water business. Time to call Jake Morrison again, because environmental sabotage was bad enough. But stealing water while billing residents for fake delivery services? That was fraud on a scale that would make federal prosecutors very, very interested. Tuesday morning, Jake Morrison arrived with equipment that looked like it belonged in a NASA laboratory. Ground-penetrating radar, flow meters that could measure water movement through solid rock, and a device he called a pipe tracer that could follow underground utilities for miles. Bud, if someone's been stealing your water for 15 years, we're going to find out exactly how much. We started at my lake and followed that hidden pipe. The ground-penetrating radar painted a clear picture. The 4-inch line ran 847 feet underground, straight to a concrete building behind the Cedar Ridge Community Center. The building I'd always assumed was for pool equipment storage. Jake's flow meter revealed the scope of the theft. This system's been moving an average of 12,000 gallons daily. Peak demand looks like summer months, probably 15,000 gallons when residents are watering lawns. Where's it going? Let's find out. The concrete building wasn't locked. Apparently, Veronica never expected anyone to check. Inside, we found a complete water treatment facility. Industrial-grade sand filters, chlorination systems, pressure tanks, and distribution pumps. Professional installation that probably cost $40,000. But here's the kicker. Brass nameplate on the main control panel read, Alpine Springs Water Delivery, Premium Mountain Source. The same company billing Cedar Ridge residents $180 monthly for delivered water. Jake whistled low. Bud, this is beautiful. They're not just stealing your water, they're running a fake delivery company. We spent an hour documenting everything, the intake system, the treatment facility, the distribution network feeding directly into Cedar Ridge's water mains. Jake's equipment confirmed what I'd suspected. Every drop of premium delivered water in those 52 homes came from my lake. How long do you think this has been running? I asked. Jake checked the installation dates on various components. Main system installed 2009, upgrades in 2012, 2016, and 2019. This is a 15-year operation. The financial math was staggering. 52 homes times $180 monthly times 12 months equals $112,320 annual revenue. Multiply that by 15 years and you're looking at $1,884,800 in total billings for stolen water. But the really beautiful part? Alpine Springs Water Delivery existed only on paper. Jake found the business registration in his phone search. Sole proprietor, Veronica Sterling Cross, registered 2009, claiming to deliver premium mountain spring water sourced from protected wilderness areas. Protected wilderness areas. She was billing residents for water from protected land while actually stealing it from my private lake. Jake, what kind of penalties are we talking about? Federal theft of utilities, wire fraud for the fake billing, environmental violations for the contamination, and probably RICO charges if she's been doing this systematically. Jake grinned like a man who'd found his favorite kind of criminal. We're talking prison time, Bud, real prison time. That afternoon, I called every resident in Cedar Ridge who'd been friendly to me over the years. Dave and Linda Kowalski, Tom Peterson, the retired teacher who'd always waved when he saw me fishing, Mary Beth Santos, who'd brought casseroles after Margaret died. The conversation went the same way every time. You're paying how much for water delivery? $180 a month. It's expensive, but Veronica says it's premium mountain spring water. When's the last time you saw a delivery truck? Long pause. You know, I can't remember ever seeing one. By evening, I had 8 Cedar Ridge residents who wanted answers about their water bills. More importantly, I had 8 residents who were willing to demand those answers publicly. Sarah Monroe called that night with news about the emergency hearing. Bud, the city withdrew their drainage petition. No explanation, just a one-line filing saying the matter requires further environmental review. Someone had gotten nervous. Someone realized that draining my lake would expose their illegal intake system. Time to turn up the pressure. Wednesday morning, I drove to Morrison Pump Company in Portland with Jake Morrison riding shotgun. The company's service manager, a gruff man named Bill Hendricks, had the look of someone who'd seen every kind of water system fraud imaginable. Yeah, I remember this installation, Bill said, pulling files from 2009. Woman paid cash for the whole thing. $43,000 for a complete intake and treatment system. Said she was starting a premium water delivery business. Did she mention stealing the water? Jake asked. Bill's laugh carried zero humor. People never mention that part, but I've been doing this for 30 years. You want to run a legitimate delivery business, you buy source rights or drill your own wells. You don't install hidden intake systems on someone else's property. The paperwork told the whole story. Veronica had purchased professional equipment under the business name Alpine Springs Water Delivery, but never filed for water rights or extraction permits. In Oregon, that's automatic theft of utilities. Here's what I don't understand, I told Jake as we drove back. Why contaminate the same water you're stealing? Because she got greedy. Your fishing guide service was attracting attention to the lake. Someone might notice the intake pipe. Better to kill the fish, blame you for environmental problems, and force you to sell. That afternoon, we installed our own equipment. Jake brought a professional flow meter with digital recording capability, the kind that could stand up in federal court. We positioned it just upstream from Veronica's intake, where it would measure exactly how much water disappeared into her system. The numbers were staggering. Peak flow at 2 p.m. showed 15,300 gallons per day heading towards Cedar Ridge. That's enough water for a small hotel, not 52 houses with city water backup. Sarah Monroe arrived that evening with legal documents that made my head spin. Bud, we're filing 3 separate lawsuits: theft of utilities, fraudulent billing practices, and environmental damage. Combined, we're looking at $2.1 million in damages. Can we prove all that? With Jake's evidence, we can prove she's been stealing 12,000 gallons daily for 15 years. That's 65.7 million gallons of water theft. In Oregon, utilities theft carries triple damages plus criminal penalties. But Sarah's real genius showed in her strategy. We're not just suing Veronica. We're suing the HOA as an entity, Alpine Springs Water Delivery as a fraudulent business, and the city inspector who filed false environmental reports. Here's something most people don't know about water rights law. Unauthorized diversion of water is theft, plain and simple. Doesn't matter if you filter it, treat it, or call it premium service. You take someone's water without permission, you're committing a felony. Translation: stealing utilities is grand larceny, regardless of how fancy your filtration system looks. Thursday brought our secret weapon, Lisa Park from Channel 8 News. Lisa specialized in consumer fraud investigations, and Dave Kowalski had sent her my story through their tip line. "Mr. Kellerman," Lisa said, setting up her camera by my lake, "if what you're telling me is true, this is the biggest utility fraud case in Oregon history." We showed her everything: the hidden intake pipe, the fake treatment facility, the bogus Alpine Springs business registration, Jake's flow meter readings, the residents' water bills for services they weren't actually receiving. Lisa's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. We're talking about a 15-year con game, residents paying premium prices for stolen water while the HOA president profits from both sides. When does this air? Sunday night. Lead story. Friday morning brought Veronica's first mistake in months. She called me directly. "Bud, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot," she said, voice honey sweet and fake as artificial vanilla. "What if I offered you $50,000 to relocate? Cash deal, no questions asked." $50,000 for property worth $300,000? Well, it's more of a nuisance settlement, for any misunderstandings about environmental issues. Misunderstandings. The woman had poisoned my lake twice and was trying to frame it as a misunderstanding. "Veronica, counteroffer, $1.7 million plus full disclosure to all Cedar Ridge residents about where their water actually comes from." "That's ridiculous. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I've discovered that Alpine Springs Water Delivery is registered in your name and has been billing residents for water stolen from my lake since 2009. Long pause. Then, "You can't prove anything." Sunday night, Channel 8 News. Tune in. Saturday night, I sat on Margaret's dock with my pH meter, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. The chemical smell was finally gone, and small trout were jumping for insects in the shallows. Margaret always said that water finds its own level. Truth has the same property. Time to let it flow. Sunday morning brought the sound of sledgehammer on metal. I looked out my kitchen window to see Veronica Sterling Cross attacking my hidden intake pipe with what looked like a 20-pound maul, swinging like someone trying to beat the truth to death. She'd parked her Tesla behind a stand of Douglas firs, probably figuring nobody would notice her at 6 a.m. on a weekend. What she didn't count on was my insomnia and Dave Kowalski's security cameras. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Veronica in her designer workout clothes, hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail, destroying evidence with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd finally realized the water was rising around her ankles. The sledgehammer connected with the flow meter housing. Sparks flew, and suddenly water erupted from the damaged pipe like a geyser. Veronica stumbled backward, soaked, as 12,000 gallons a day found a new way to the surface. That's when Murphy's Law kicked in with beautiful precision. The water main break flooded straight toward the Cedar Ridge utility building, where all that expensive filtration equipment sat in a below-ground mechanical room. I could hear the electrical systems dying from my kitchen. Pops and hisses as $40,000 worth of water treatment infrastructure drowned in the same water it had been stealing for 15 years. Veronica stood knee-deep in muddy water, still holding the sledgehammer, watching her illegal empire dissolve in real time. The look on her face was worth every dead fish, every threatening letter, every sleepless night she'd cost me. My phone rang. Sarah Monroe, voice tight with controlled excitement. "Bud, tell me you got that on video." Every swing. Beautiful. Destroying evidence during an active investigation adds obstruction charges. And if she damaged the pipe, that's destruction of property. She did more than damage it. She flooded her own equipment room. Sarah's laugh carried the pure joy of a lawyer watching opposing counsel self-destruct. "Bud, she just handed us the case on a platinum platter." By noon, the emergency plumber bills started rolling in. Dave Kowalski texted me photos of 4 different plumbing trucks outside the HOA building. The basement flooding had knocked out power to the entire water treatment system. But Veronica's real problem wasn't the equipment damage. Her real problem was that 52 families in Cedar Ridge suddenly had no water pressure and no explanation why their delivery service had mysteriously stopped delivering. Linda Kowalski called around 2 p.m. "Bud, Veronica's telling everyone the water company is having supply chain issues, but Mary Beth Santos walked down to the utility building and saw all that flooded equipment. She's asking questions Veronica can't answer." What kind of questions? Like why there's industrial water treatment equipment in what's supposed to be a pool house, and why none of us have ever seen an Alpine Springs delivery truck. That afternoon brought the insurance adjuster. Professional woman in her 40s, sharp suit, clipboard full of questions about unusual water damage to basement mechanical systems. She spent an hour photographing the flooded equipment and taking notes about possible sabotage of utility infrastructure. "Ma'am," I heard her tell Veronica, "your policy doesn't cover damage caused by intentional destruction of your own property. If you hit that pipe yourself, this is fraud, not an accident." Veronica's voice pitched higher. "It wasn't intentional. I was trying to fix a leak." "With a sledgehammer? At 6 in the morning? Ma'am, that's not how pipe repair works." Sunday evening, Channel 8 News aired Lisa Park's investigation. Tonight at 11, HOA president accused of running 15-year water theft scheme, billing residents for stolen utilities while poisoning Source Lake. The story was devastating. Lisa had done her homework, interviewing residents who'd never seen delivery trucks, showing the hidden intake system, displaying my flow meter readings alongside Alpine Springs billing records. The math was impossible to ignore. 1.7 million in billings for water stolen from a private lake. But the real killer was Dave Kowalski's security footage. Veronica's white Tesla, creeping toward my lake at 2 a.m. with chemical containers visible in the back seat. Then Sunday morning's sledgehammer rampage, shown in high-definition color. Veronica Sterling Cross declined our request for an on-camera interview, Lisa reported. However, she did provide a written statement claiming that any water extraction was done with proper permits and that environmental testing was conducted by licensed professionals. Proper permits. I almost laughed. Jake Morrison had confirmed that no extraction permits existed for my property. The only licensed professional involved was Jake himself, documenting Veronica's crimes for federal prosecution. My phone didn't stop ringing Sunday night. Tom Peterson, Mary Beth Santos. 8 different Cedar Ridge residents who wanted to know if their water bills were part of a fraud scheme. The answer was yes. All of it. 15 years of fake delivery charges for water stolen from my lake. Monday morning brought Veronica's final desperate play. She called me at 7 a.m., voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Bud, let's be reasonable. I'll pay for the pipe repair. Maybe we can work out some kind of water sharing agreement. 50-50 split of the Alpine Springs revenue. Revenue sharing. On stolen water. From my own property." "Veronica," I said, "you poisoned my lake. Twice. You've stolen 65 million gallons of water. You've defrauded 52 families for 15 years. What exactly do you think we have to negotiate?" The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "Please," she whispered, "I can't go to prison." Margaret always said that people who abuse power eventually run out of people to abuse. Time to find out if she was right. Tuesday morning brought the health inspector. Not Bradley Hutchins this time. His supervisor, a stern woman named Carol Martinez, who looked like she'd seen every kind of municipal corruption and had zero patience for any of it. "Mr. Kellerman, we're here about the emergency health order filed against your property. I've reviewed the documentation, and frankly, I'm confused." She held up a manila folder thick with official-looking papers. "According to our records, Inspector Hutchins filed an emergency drainage order citing imminent public health hazards, but when I checked with the county health department, no such order exists in their system." "You're saying it's fake?" "I'm saying someone forged county health documents using city letterhead. That's a felony." Carol Martinez had the look of someone who took document fraud personally. She spent an hour reviewing every piece of paper Hutchins had filed, cross-referencing dates and signatures with official county records. "Mr. Kellerman, this emergency order was never filed with proper authorities. The signature is forged, the reference numbers don't exist in our system, and the health code citations are completely fabricated." Veronica had pushed Hutchins to create fake emergency orders to force drainage of my lake. But fake government documents weren't just fraud. They were federal crimes that carried mandatory prison sentences. That afternoon brought panic in Cedar Ridge. The water pressure crisis had entered its third day, and residents were demanding answers about their premium delivery service that had mysteriously vanished. Mary Beth Santos called around 3 p.m. "Bud, there's an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Veronica's claiming the water company is having supply chain issues, but nobody's buying it anymore. Too many people saw that flooded equipment room." "What are people saying?" "Tom Peterson did the math on our water bills. 52 homes times $180 monthly equals almost $10,000 per month. For that kind of money, we should see delivery trucks daily." But nobody can remember ever seeing one. The revolt was starting. 15 years of fraudulent billing was falling apart because Veronica had destroyed her own infrastructure in a panic. But Veronica wasn't done fighting. Tuesday evening brought her most desperate gambit yet. The knock on my door came at 8 p.m. 3 men in cheap suits, looking like they'd learned to intimidate people from watching bad movies. The one in front had the soft hands of someone who'd never done real work, but the dead eyes of someone willing to do whatever paid well. "Mr. Kellerman, we're here on behalf of Ms. Sterling Cross. She'd like to resolve this situation quietly." "And you are?" "Business consultants. Ms. Sterling Cross is prepared to offer you $75,000 cash to relocate and sign a non-disclosure agreement about any alleged water issues." "Business consultants? Right. I'd bet my disability check these guys had arrest records longer than my fishing rod." "Gentlemen, I think you should leave." The leader stepped closer, invading my personal space with practiced intimidation. "Mr. Kellerman, Ms. Sterling Cross is trying to be reasonable. But if you keep making trouble for her business interests..." That's when Dave Kowalski's voice cut through the evening air. "Evening, fellas. Everything okay over here, bud?" Dave had brought backup. Tom Peterson, carrying a baseball bat, Bill Santos with his Marine Corps bearing and the kind of stare that made smart people reconsider their life choices. 3 more neighbors I recognized from the friendly waves. "Just some business consultants," I said. "They were just leaving." The leader looked around at 6 angry neighbors, calculated his odds, and apparently decided that $75,000 wasn't worth a hospital visit. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Kellerman." After they left, Dave shook his head. "Bud, she sent muscle to your house, over water billing. That woman's completely lost her mind. She's desperate. Channel 8 exposed the fraud, her equipment's destroyed, and 52 families want answers about their water bills." "Speaking of which," Tom Peterson said, "tonight's HOA meeting should be interesting. Half the neighborhood wants Veronica's head on a platter." Wednesday morning brought the FBI. 2 agents in dark suits who made Veronica's business consultants look like amateur hour. Agent Sarah Kim introduced herself and her partner as specialists in utility fraud and municipal corruption. "Mr. Kellerman, we understand you've documented a 15-year pattern of water theft and fraudulent billing. We'd like to review your evidence." They spent 3 hours going through everything. Jake Morrison's flow meter readings, the hidden intake system, Alpine Springs billing records, Dave Kowalski's security footage, the forged health orders, all of it. "Sir," Agent Kim said finally, "this is the most thoroughly documented utility fraud case we've seen. Your evidence package is prosecution ready." "What happens now?" "Now we arrest everyone involved. Water theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, forgery of government documents, witness intimidation, and probably RICO charges if we can prove she was running a continuing criminal enterprise." That afternoon, I sat on Margaret's dock with my pH meter. The water was crystal clear again, pH back to a perfect 7.1. Small trout were rising for mayflies in the late afternoon light. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Monroe. "HOA emergency meeting tonight 7 p.m. Veronica called it to address water service concerns. FBI says they'll be watching. This should be fun." Margaret always said that cornered animals make the most mistakes. Time to see how many mistakes Veronica had left in her. 7 o'clock Wednesday night, the Cedar Ridge Community Center was packed like a church on Christmas morning. 52 families, 3 reporters, 2 FBI agents pretending to be residents, and 1 very nervous HOA president who kept checking her phone like she was expecting a rescue call that would never come. The smell of stale coffee and mounting anger filled the room. Veronica sat at the front table with her fancy clipboard and fake confidence, but I could see the sweat stains spreading under her arms despite the evening chill. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice pitched higher than usual, "I've called this emergency meeting to address the temporary water service disruption we've been experiencing." Mary Beth Santos stood up in the third row. "Veronica, where exactly are the Alpine Springs delivery trucks? Nobody's seen one in 3 days. There's been a supply chain issue at the source facility. These things happen with premium mountain water services." Tom Peterson raised his hand. "I called Alpine Springs customer service. The number on our bills, it goes straight to your personal cell phone." The room went dead quiet. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the creak of folding chairs as people shifted nervously. Veronica's laugh sounded like breaking glass. That's just a routing system, for customer convenience." That's when I stood up. The vintage pH meter in my hand caught the overhead lights, brass gleaming like a weapon of truth. "Veronica, I have a question about water quality." Her face went white as printer paper. "Bud, this is a private HOA meeting." "Actually," Agent Kim said from the back row, "Mr. Kellerman has every right to address issues affecting community water safety." I walked to the front of the room, pulled out my phone, and connected it to the community center's projection system. Dave Kowalski's security footage filled the screen. Veronica's Tesla creeping toward my lake at 2 a.m., chemical containers visible in the back seat. 15 years ago, you installed a hidden intake pipe on my property without permission. For 15 years, you've been stealing 12,000 gallons daily from my lake while billing residents $180 monthly for premium delivery service that doesn't exist. The room erupted. Angry voices, demands for explanations, the sound of people realizing they'd been robbed for 15 years. "That's ridiculous," Veronica shouted over the chaos. "We have legitimate contracts with Alpine Springs Water Delivery." "Alpine Springs Water Delivery," I said, advancing toward her table, "is registered in your name as a sole proprietorship. There are no delivery trucks. There is no mountain spring source. There's just a stolen water system in your basement and $1.7 million in fraudulent billing." I held up my pH meter, the same instrument that had detected her chemical sabotage. "But here's the beautiful part, Veronica. When you dumped pool shock to poison my lake and stop my fishing, you poisoned your own water supply. 15 years of theft, and you contaminated your own stolen goods." The projection screen switched to Jake Morrison's water analysis. Calcium hypochlorite residue, chlorine levels that would kill everything in the water, contamination patterns pointing to deliberate dumping. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, "you've been paying premium prices for chemically contaminated water stolen from my property, the same water your HOA president poisoned to force me out." Linda Kowalski's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Veronica, is this true? Have we been drinking stolen lake water for 15 years? Veronica stood up, hands shaking, face red with desperate anger. "This is all lies. Bud Kellerman is a bitter old man trying to destroy our community because we won't let him run his fishing business." That's when I smiled, the same smile Margaret used to give me when she knew she'd won an argument. "Veronica, I am your water company. I have been for 15 years. I pulled out my phone, opened the flow control app Jake had installed, and tapped the shutoff command. Somewhere beneath the community center, 12,000 gallons per day stopped flowing. The water pressure in Cedar Ridge dropped to zero. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Tom Peterson started laughing. Not humor, recognition, the sound of a man finally understanding the con game he'd been paying for. "She's been billing us $180 monthly for water from Bud's Lake," he said. "Water she stole, water she poisoned, water we've been drinking for 15 years. The room exploded again. 52 families doing math in their heads, calculating 15 years of fraudulent billing, realizing they'd been victims of the biggest utility scam in Oregon history. Agent Kim stood up, badge visible now. "Veronica Sterling Cross, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, theft of utilities, environmental crimes, and violation of the Federal Clean Water Act." The handcuffs clicked with finality. Camera flashes lit the room like lightning. And through it all, Veronica kept screaming about misunderstandings and business disputes, as if words could undo 15 years of documented crime. As they led her away, I held up my pH meter one more time. "Translation," I called out over the chaos. "You can't steal someone's water and then poison it to hide the theft. Water always finds its way to the truth." Margaret would have loved this moment. Justice, served as cold and clear as mountain spring water. 3 months later, the settlement check arrived on a Tuesday morning that smelled like autumn and new beginnings. $850,000 from the HOA insurance fund, plus legal fees, plus damages for environmental restoration. Sarah Monroe had negotiated it down from the full $1.7 million, but only because we wanted to avoid bankrupting the 52 families who'd been victims of Veronica's fraud. Veronica herself was enjoying federal hospitality at the minimum security facility in Sheridan, Oregon. 18 months for wire fraud, mail fraud, and environmental crimes. Her lawyer had tried to claim she was just a misguided HOA president, but the FBI's investigation had uncovered detailed records of the 15-year scam. Turns out she'd been skimming additional money from the fake Alpine Springs accounts. Fraud within fraud within fraud. Bradley Hutchins, the city inspector with the expensive watch, got 3 years for bribery and forging government documents. Apparently, Veronica wasn't his only client. The FBI found a whole network of corrupt inspections paid for with Rolex watches and Hawaiian vacations. But the real satisfaction came from watching Cedar Ridge transform. The new HOA board, led by Tom Peterson and Mary Beth Santos, signed a legitimate water purchase agreement within a month. $45 per home per month for clean, tested, properly delivered lake water. Residents saved $135 monthly while getting better service and actual transparency. Jake Morrison supervised the lake restoration personally. Fish and Wildlife stocked it with rainbow trout, steelhead, and native cutthroat. The EPA monitoring station recorded water quality back to pristine mountain standards within 6 weeks. My pH meter, that old brass guardian, finally read the numbers it was meant to read. The Margaret Kellerman Memorial Fishing Program launched in September. Every Saturday morning, I take disabled veterans out on the lake. No charge, just the peace that comes from clean water and patient fish. We've got 12 regulars now, guys who found the same healing Margaret and I discovered on these quiet mornings. Dave Kowalski installed a proper security system covering the entire intake area, not because we expect more theft, but because federal investigators wanted documentation of the legitimate water-sharing agreement. His cameras now capture sunrise over the lake instead of midnight criminal activity. The Environmental Education Center opens next month in the renovated HOA building. Where Veronica's illegal filtration equipment once sat, we'll teach kids about water quality, conservation, and the legal frameworks that protect natural resources. The brass nameplate from my pH meter sits in a place of honor, representing 37 years of water treatment expertise finally put to good use. Sarah Monroe used part of her legal fees to establish a rural property rights clinic, helping other landowners fight HOA overreach and utility fraud. She says my case became the template for prosecuting organized theft of natural resources. Water law professors at the University of Oregon now teach the Kellerman Standard for documenting utility theft. 3 families from Cedar Ridge have become regular fishing partners. Tom Peterson brings his grandson every Sunday morning. Mary Beth Santos learned to tie flies with precision that would make a surgeon jealous. Linda Kowalski discovered that her anxiety disappeared completely when she was standing knee-deep in clean water, watching for rises. The scholarship fund launches next year. Full tuition for rural kids studying environmental science or water resource management. We're calling it the Alpine Springs Memorial Scholarship, named after Veronica's fake company, because sometimes the best justice is turning someone's crime into someone else's opportunity. Last week, Channel 8 News called about a follow-up story. Apparently, my case inspired investigations into HOA utility fraud across 3 states. Lisa Park said I'd started something bigger than just getting my lake back. But every morning, when I sit on Margaret's dock with my coffee and that old pH meter, I'm not thinking about fraud investigations or federal precedents. I'm thinking about the sound of clean water lapping against hand-carved wood, the smell of Douglas fir mixing with mountain air, and the sight of healthy trout rising for mayflies in water that finally tests the way it should. Margaret always said that truth and clean water have the same property. Both always find their way to where they belong.